Welcome to Moral Side of the News, our weekly discussion of today's top local, national, and world stories from a moral, ethical, and religious viewpoint. I'm Shawn Kaelin with the WHAS Crusade for Children. I'm joined today, as always, by a distinguished panel of local religious leaders. Father John Stoltz, St. Aloysius Catholic Church. Rabbi Litvin, Chairman, Kentucky Jewish Council. Dr. John Slider, retired pastor, Free Methodist Church. Reverend Richard Uhler, retired U.S. Army chaplain. And Reverend Harriett Akins-Banman, Albany Centenary United Methodist Church. We begin this week with the presidential election.
This morning, Donald Trump projected to be the next president of the United States.
Well, I want to thank you all very much.
The former president once again outperforming expectations, shocking his political opponents, and sweeping enough of the battleground states to win the White House.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason. And that reason was to save our country and to restore America to greatness. And now we are going to fulfill that mission together.
Overnight, Trump addressing a fired-up crowd of supporters in Florida, declaring victory minutes after ABC News and other outlets called Pennsylvania for him.
I will not rest until we have delivered the strong, safe, and prosperous America that our children deserve and that you deserve. This will truly be the golden age of America.
The race ultimately coming down to 7 swing states. Trump may now sweep all of them. After 11 p.m., the first one was called for him. The former president later winning Georgia, then Pennsylvania, and clinching victory with a win in Wisconsin. In county after county across the country, improving on his margin of victory in past races. ABC News exit polling data showing Trump gained critical ground, particularly among young men in union households. But his most surprising surge among Hispanic voters. The best showing for a Republican presidential candidate in exit polls since 1976.
Vice President Kamala Harris addressing a crowd of teary supporters at her alma mater, Howard University, telling them her heart is full.
The outcome of this election is not what we wanted, not what we fought for, not what we voted for, but hear me when I say, the light of America's promise will always burn bright. Earlier today, I spoke with President-elect Trump and congratulated him on his victory. I also told him that we will help him and his team with their transition.
A spokesman for the president-elect saying Trump acknowledged Vice President Harris on her strength, professionalism, and tenacity throughout the campaign, adding both leaders agreed on the importance of unifying the country, a theme Trump sounded in his own victory speech.
We're going to help our country heal. We're going to help our country heal. We have a country that needs help, and it needs help very badly.
So panel, crazy news cycle over the past several months, several years really. We've had impeachments, indictments, convictions, Democratic candidate for president being replaced less than 4 months from the election, multiple assassination attempts, and now many are saying Trump's victory is the greatest comeback in American political history. Your thoughts on this past Tuesday and moving forward in this country?
I think we've seen at least a movement along some trends that I've been noticing, and others. I can't claim originality. A continuing collapse in the trust of legacy media, whatever term, mainstream media, some call it. I tend to call it downstream media, but the legacy media, the media that we have trusted, we as a people. I see also the growing irrelevance of entertainment elites and political elites. Together, they, let me try to say it Harriet, neutrally. They engineered the candidacy of Vice President Harris. The political and entertainment elites, and I see them as growing more and more irrelevant. The little package we had beforehand suggested a a change in, or a diminishment anyway, a growing diminishment, if that's possible, of identity politics. That there seems to be a broadening on the Republican side of a wider demographic. And so I see in that respect some hopefulness. I do think the Democrat Party needs to take a look at its connection to the leftist wing, not the liberal wing, the leftist wing of its party. They certainly did not deliver. That message of the leftists did not deliver for the Democrat Party, and they need to take a look at that. Did I kill conversation? I'm sorry.
Richard?
Frankly, I thought Trump was a long shot in 2016 because he was an outsider. Until something happened the previous week in 2016, was the Cubs won the World Series after 108 years. And I said, well, then it's possible for a miracle of him getting elected, I guess. But getting reelected and doing something that only Grover Cleveland did back in the this second time around was 1892, to be unconsecutively. So he must have learned from his mistakes of 2020. However, the main undoing appears to still be the pandemic. As far as some of the things related to what happened and what didn't happen, as I'm listening to both candidates, I see them trying to spell out their plan on the issues, and I don't know if I really heard a lot from the Democrats as to what their plan really was. So depending on the source, I saw percentages of main issues were economy 33%, immigration 32%, abortion 11%, some different percentages depending on the source. But then there was a lot of mudslinging going on. And now this is nothing new, because it was back in Adams and Jefferson, they really went at it with a little dose of Hamilton along that way. Became in earnest around the time of Grover Cleveland in the 1880s, where they did a lot of mudslinging, but became more of an art form in the 20th century with television. And more recently, though, it's reached new heights, having gone beyond the candidates, and now it seems to be also attacking supporters of such candidates. So I'm seeing a totally different aspects of what's happening in campaigning. I frankly think the campaigning period should be a lot less than it is. And we shouldn't have to hear things for 2 years and hear the same things for 2 years. But tactics, calling candidates different things and different names and a bunch of name calling here and there. So that's kind of at least some of my take. Now the other piece of it is, as far as the attempted assassinations, how different the race may have been if things were different on July 13th. A similar situation occurred, and here's another historical event that occurred back in 1933 when FDR was president-elect, and a person missed his intended target, and it cost the life of the mayor of Chicago. So things can turn differently in different ways, depending on everybody's perspective.
To a point, I agree that the campaign season, I think, is also too long. I think one of the effects of it is that our civic leaders that we elect, instead of, we are seeing them as civic leaders, representatives, senators, and executive doing work. We see them as politicians all of the time, because the campaigns seem to be going on all of the time, and every day it's as if they're running for office instead of, and doing that kind of work, which is important work, but it needs to be a shorter period of time. The other thing I think has happened is the social media, which is a gift in many ways, but what is, I think with a long campaign season too, the quantity of our talk has increased a lot. I'm not so sure the quality of our talk has increased a lot. And so I would like to hear more. I think the public would like to hear more about policy. about what goes on. How does government actually work? I actually do not mind, actually appreciate a partisan divide. I think it's really good for our country to have that. It's good for creativity, it's good for that work, and for us to be able to be also maybe politically different from each other, thinking differently, but still sort of being together in a civic community, working for the best. To me, that would be ideal that we do that. I'm not so sure always we enter into that mindset. We enter into the mindset of one against another in everything. And it's really not honest. It's kind of an illusion. And I don't think it's very real. Something else I've heard recently is about maybe that there could be a reform of our primary system, that instead of the primary being, that primary election being one divided, where one party and another party as separate, of combining them together, because the separate ones tend to push the candidates to the extremes. And it's not really doing our country any favor. Now, that's a little bit more, the whole idea of it's actually a bit more complicated than I can wrap my mind around, so I'm just sort of initiating and beginning this, because there may be other implications that I don't see. But that is something I do see right there, is that particular effect from the primary season the way that we have it now. And so maybe we could look at a primary reform for that and to do that.
Harriet?
I'm sad at the result, primarily because of all the hate language that the newly elected president used during the campaign. And I think if you're a white male, you're going to be okay. But for those of us that are not, I think that there will be revenge and backlash, and it's going to be painful. I think it's going to be really difficult on immigrants in our country, and who of us sitting here are not, right? And I understand the stress that the border puts on us, but at the same time, just the language of hate and push, and it pains me greatly. And I hope that I'm really wrong in all of that, that there might be some element of truth when he spoke of unity, but I've not seen that. I didn't see it in his first 4 years. I didn't hear it in either time he campaigned. And I'm not sure what that looks like for him. And when you have one person that can push $1 bazillion into your campaign and then call him a superhero, what's behind all of that? How did that influence voting? So I think there needs to be an evaluation of what, a relook at caps of spending and how contributions are made and who they're made by. And so I sit here saddened by the news and concerned about the suffering that it may unleash in the new year.
One thing I feel supremely confident in is that this country will continue to be the greatest country God's created since the Davidic kingdom. The line of people trying to get into this country hasn't gotten any shorter when a Democrat's elected, when Republicans elected, the economic opportunities. And I think that one thing that the media insists on investing in is the mudslinging, is the opinions back and forth, is the talking points, when, as you mentioned, the number one issue for people was the economy. And I think if you pressed people on that number two issue of why do you care about immigration, they'll say the economy. Mm-hmm. So whether Americans are black or white or Jewish or Catholic or anything else, they want to be able to provide for their families. They want their kids to have a better future than better life than they had, and their grandkids to have a better future. I think there's a reason there's only an American dream. No one talks about moving to France and living the French dream. The French dream is to move to America and open a business. So that unique blessing of America, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the foremost Jewish leader of the modern era, my personal mentor, referred to America as a kingdom of kindness, a Medina shel Chesed. The idea that I could vote in this country is remarkable. For the vast majority of my family's history, wherever they live, the idea that they could have any voice in the representation of the government. The Jews were tolerated at best, usually oppressed, but the idea that they could have a voice. I went with my children to vote. I've never not taken my kids. My kids sat with me as they voted. I explained each issue. They came to me later to say how we do on the various amendments and everything. But I brought my kids with me because it's a unique blessing. I think we have a spiritual, well, I certainly would never tell my congregants how to vote. I certainly encourage them to vote because it is unique that we can give voice to our morals, give voice to our ethics, and try to make that happen in our government. And I think regardless of who wins, what that is as a country doesn't change. And I think what we did see was a massive rejection of so much of what the media wants to make the election about. The election was about the economy, stupid, as James Carville said in the 90s, and is still true today. It was the #1 issue. It wasn't Trump, it wasn't Kamala, it wasn't any of the talking points. Jill Stein, who ran with the Green Party, tried to make her support for Hamas the entire center of her campaign. Support me because I support Hamas. She got 1 million less votes than she got 8 years ago. She said she was going to steal Michigan from Kamala. Michigan went to Trump not because of the 0.2% of the vote that Jill Stein got, but because she lost voters in Lansing and in Grand Rapids. She lost union voters who voted the other way overwhelmingly, according to them in the polls, because of the economy. So there was, in many ways, a great rejection of hate, a great rejection of extremism. And I think that conversations like this one, as you said, quality over quantity, but conversations happening is the way this moves forward. I think that it's very interesting to think if there hadn't been extremist voices early in Vice President Harris's campaign, pushing her not to take the Jewish candidate, who was the incredibly popular governor of Pennsylvania. Many people said it's his views on Israel, but our governor was on the short list. His views on Israel don't differ from Governor Shapiro's. Governor Walz's opinions on Israel don't change from Governor Shapiro's. Senator Kelly from Arizona's views don't change from Governor Shapiro's. The only difference is his name is Joshua Shapiro and he went to a Hebrew school. I don't know what the outcome would have been, but it'd certainly be interesting to think about if his faith had not held him back from that position, where would we be today? So I think that a lot of that focus on these and not the issues that affect your family was rejected by the voters. And they said, what we want is a better life for our children, regardless, whatever category you want to put us in, whether it's by religion, whether it's by race, whether it's by gender. And I think most of us want the same things, and I hope we find it.
I think there was a rejection of identity politics. Moving away from that, yesterday I encountered randomly. I can tell you the circumstances, but it's irrelevant. But two immigrants from Hispanic Hispanic countries, Spanish-speaking countries, Colombia and Cuba. The Cuban immigrant who had become a citizen already was excited to vote. Both of them brought up the election. I was going to, in polite society, you don't talk politics, right? But he was excited about the results of the election, and one of his main issues was immigration, illegal immigration. The gentleman from Colombia had been here about 6 years, really struggled with his English, gave me a chance to practice a little bit of my conversational Spanish. And I think I may have at one point asked where the restroom was, but by accident. But he was excited too about the result of the election. He brought it up. He had not become a citizen yet. He had come from Colombia to New Jersey to Kentucky. And so I see this identity politics as slowly getting out of our political system. As a word of comfort, Harriett, this is something I told myself before Election Day, and that is the Lord God omnipotent reigns. And that is the focus, I think, of our lives as persons of faith. Mm-hmm. And it's not who gets elected president. It's not what party is here or there, but the Lord God omnipotent reigns.
And I think it's how we choose to live out our faith belief.
Sure.
When we go into a season like I'm anticipating I might be walking into, And the other piece that gives me great hope, and I appreciate what you said, John, is that the teaching that is universal and ever how it comes to us through our faith traditions is to do unto others. It's to do unto others as you had them do unto you, to love the stranger, to care for one another, to carry one another's burdens. And so, and to treat one another with respect and humility and compassion and kindness and great love. And that's where I'm going to, that's the center out of which I hope I will live.
And I certainly hope that there is a response like that from the president-elect and his supporters. It's hard to seek out unity with people who have essentially taken the stance of reductio ad Hitleren. And that, you know, if you're being accused of being another Hitler and a fascist, it will take a hard climb to welcome people into a unified approach to problems. Let's hope it happens.
My research has uncovered that this is not something new by calling them fascists, because it's gone back to at least the 60s. Barry Goldwater was called a fascist, and several of them since then, from what I've seen. But, and we could probably ask the question, you know, when we try to hear people saying, well, let me tell you the truth, and what is the truth? You know, there's been this outcrying of neither candidate is telling the truth, or even both claim, or they both claim to have the truth. But you know, who are we supposed to believe? Well, according to an ancient philosopher and theologian, he says the truth was a mirror in the hands of God. It fell and broke into pieces. Everyone took a piece of it. They looked at it and thought they had the truth. So what's the truth these days?
I think the appeal to unity has a good intention. It sounds good. I'm not so sure how realistic it is. I think the word I would rather hear is this: an appeal to the common good. And that is an appeal for the whole flourishing of our nation. Because as I said just a moment ago, partisanship in a healthy space is actually, I think, a good thing. And I think it's good to recognize that we differ from one another, that the two candidates who ran for office differed from each other. And people who support one candidate or another, that they differ. And the differences are okay. So that we're not seeking unity where somehow we agree. I think that somehow that sort of version is kind of an illusion. But rather we're seeking for the flourishing of everyone with many different ideas, approaches, cultures, in a sense of respect for one another, knowing that we're all seeking a good for us for our future.
John Wesley, the founder of the Methodist movement, has this famous quote of, and it was about theological issues, but it certainly fits, and that is, let us agree to disagree, and yet work together. And so if we could do that, that would be lovely.
The Rebbe described America's government's unique role in the world, as opposed to many other governments, as uplifting segments of society and thereby ensuring the flourishing of the whole. And I think that's what unity means. It doesn't mean we're all the same, but it means that when I care for my neighbor, when I care for that person who might be a different religion, creed, color, etc., it benefits America. When people do well in America, America does well. And I think there's a self-interest in caring for your neighbors. There's a self-interest in caring for your community. Because if we're engaged in strife, we can't excel as a country.
A quick concern is that we not become isolated as America, that we continue to have good rapport and conversation with our allies.
Sure.
Yeah,
I just want that to happen. I just want that to happen.
Isolationism has been a trend in America's relations in the world. We were that way in the 1930s before World War II, and we were there that way before World War I. And so we've had those trends, and we've also gone the other way to become internationalists after World War II. And so we've had those trends, and so both ways of going are realistic for us. And then we have to discern really what is best for the world too. Not only our own best interest, but what is actually good for our country, because we're a good country. What's actually good for the world? What can we contribute to make us good?
And that's a good segue, possibly. We only have about 2.5 minutes left and not enough time to really dive into the subject, but it's been something we've been following on the show for a long time, the Iran-Israel relationship, what the new administration brings to that. Iran was making a lot of noise last week before the election that we're going to strike back imminently because what of Israel's response to their attack. They backed off a little bit. I read an article before we came in here today just that the rhetoric has been pulled back a little bit over the past couple of days since the election results. How do we see that going? How do we see that playing out in the last 2 minutes of the show?
The biggest news on the Israeli side is the firing of Gallant and the hiring of Israel Katz as the new defense minister. It shows a much more unified approach by the Israeli government, where politics will play a much smaller role in Israel's defense, and hopefully defense will play a much larger role. But I think it's important to remember that Iran sees Israel as little Satan. They see America as the great Satan. And while they have held back a little bit, the Republican Guard did tweet out a video threatening to assassinate President Trump in the last 24 hours. So they see Israel as a diverse country, as America is, as one that supports biblical values, as America does, as one that supports rights for women and minorities and religious minorities, as America does, and they hate those things. Those things certainly aren't present in Iran, and they hate that they're present anywhere. Evil hates good. Darkness hates God. And I think that the idea that that's going to go away without being confronted, that it'll float away if we sign a deal or smile at them or promise them enough things, that they will stop hating everything that America stands for, I think is short-sighted.
Anyone else? We do have a few more seconds left.
I do think the incoming administration will provide a little more clarity and focus in our relationship and with Israel.
Brother John, Harriett, Richard?
So I'll just say this from a religious perspective. The guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps, regardless of who's in the White House and regardless of who's in power in America, Iran, Russia, or anywhere else. I have great hope for the future and safety of Israel. While the IDF and the Mossad and all of them are amazing and doing great jobs, our fate is with the Lord, and I have no fear.
Very good. That'll do it for this week's Moral Side of the News. Thanks to our panel this week, Father John Stoltz, Rabbi Litvin, Dr. John Slider, Reverend Richard Uhler, Reverend Harriett Akins-Banman, and happy birthday.
This month? Don't rush it. Oh, Marine Corps birthday. Yes, okay.
On Sunday, April 10th. So all you Marines out there, happy birthday. Today's November 10th.
Yes.
Because we tape on Thursday at Sunday. So anyway. All right. Anyway, have a good week. Thank you for the great discussion today. And we'll see you again next week on Moral Side of the News.